What happens when a private confrontation is never meant to be seen, but a hidden camera catches every second anyway. In a sealed dressing room far away from the noise of the set, Esther steps in with something in her hand that changes everything. A leaked file, a chain of messages, and a truth Wang thought would never reach daylight. What follows is not a conversation. It is a collision. And by the end of it, nothing in their circle remains the same. Stay until the end because what is revealed inside that room was never supposed to leave it. The dressing room was unusually quiet. No staff, no assistants, no cameras in sight. At least that is what everyone believed. Inside, Esther stood still for a moment, staring at the closed door behind her as if deciding whether she was walking into closure or chaos. Then she raised her hand and knocked once. Not soft, not aggressive, certain. The door opened. Wang looked up, already sensing something was wrong before a single word was spoken. There are moments where silence speaks first. This was one of them. Esther did not waste time. She walked in, placed her phone on the table, and turned the screen toward him. Messages, screenshots, a timeline of rumors that had been spreading online for days. Dylan glanced at it, then back at her. Not confused, not surprised, just careful. That reaction alone changed the energy in the room. Because denial would have been easier. But he did not deny it. Instead, he asked one question. Who showed you this? Esther did not answer. She stepped closer instead. And that was when the tension shifted from uncomfortable to dangerous. Because closeness removes escape. And there was nowhere for this conversation to go, but through. Outside the room. No one knew what was happening. But what they did not know was that a second phone had already started recording. Not officially. Not publicly. But enough. Enough for history. Esther finally spoke. You said it was over. Dylan did not move. I said a lot of things. That answer hit harder than expected. Because it confirmed something she already feared. This was not misunderstanding. It was management. Of truth. Of perception. Of distance. Esther tapped the phone once. Then slid it closer again. Then explain this. A pause followed. Not dramatic. Just heavy. Dylan finally exhaled. Slow. Controlled. And for the first time, the confidence in his posture softened. Not broken, but exposed. You were not supposed to see that. That line changed everything. Because it was not a denial. It was an admission of control. And once control enters a conversation, trust becomes unstable. Esther's voice lowered. So it is true. Dylan did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked away. Not from guilt. From calculation. Because people who manage image do not react emotionally first. They measure consequences. And that silence was louder than any confession. In that moment, the door behind them shifted slightly. A faint sound. The hidden camera angle adjusted. Not noticeable to them, but enough to capture everything. The conversation was no longer private. It had already become evidence. Esther stepped back. So, what am I to you in all of this? That question was not about rumors. It was about placement. Where she stood in the structure of his life. Dylan finally looked at her directly. And for the first time, there was no performance in his expression. You were never part of the rumor. That answer was worse than anything else. Because it meant the situation was larger than her. And smaller at the same time. Not about feelings. About positioning. About what could be shown and what had to be hidden. Esther picked up her phone again. Then I am done being silent. And that was the moment everything shifted. Because silence is not passive in this world. It is currency. And once someone decides to spend it, everything becomes unstable. Dylan stepped forward, lowering his voice. Careful. If this leaves this room, it does not just affect me. Esther looked at him, then answered without hesitation. It already has. A long pause followed. And for the first time, neither of them spoke. Because both understood the truth. The conversation was no longer about explanation. It was about consequence. And sequence. What happened after that room was never officially confirmed. But within days, the rumors stopped circulating in the same way. Statements shifted. Public narratives softened. And certain names stopped being mentioned altogether. Not because the truth was erased, but because something inside the structure had been exposed. And once exposure begins, control cannot return in the same form. As for what was said inside that room, only fragments remain. A sentence here, a reaction there, a recording that was never meant to exist. But enough to confirm one thing. Nothing in that circle was ever as simple as it appeared. And the real story was never about rumors at all. It was about what people were willing to protect, and what they were willing to sacrifice to keep it protected. The moment the dressing room door closed, nothing inside that space stayed private anymore. Even if no one admitted it, even if no one confirmed it, something had already escaped. Not a person, not a sound, but information. And information spreads faster than truth ever can. Within hours, whispers started circulating through the production team. Not official statements, not confirmed reports, just fragments. A sentence overheard in passing. A reaction described differently by multiple people. A silence that felt too heavy to be normal. And all of it pointed back to one moment. That confrontation between Esther Yu and Dylan Wang. But what made it worse was not what was said. It was what people believed was not said. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are built on what is missing, not what is visible. The hidden recording that captured part of the exchange never showed a full picture. Only fragments. A raised voice. A pause too long to be casual. A name mentioned, but never fully understood in context. And that was enough. Enough to turn curiosity into speculation. And speculation into pressure. Dylan was the first to feel it. Not publicly. At first. But in the quiet ways fame always reacts before headlines do. The way conversations suddenly stop when he enters a room. The way phones tilt slightly when he walks past. The way people avoid confirming or denying anything directly. Silence becomes louder than words. Meanwhile, Esther stopped responding to questions entirely. Not because she had nothing to say, but because anything she said would become part of something larger than her control. And that is when everything shifted again. Because control was no longer held by individuals. It was held by perception. And perception was already moving without permission. 3 days later, a controlled statement was released. Carefully worded, neutral, designed to reduce tension without confirming anything. But it failed. Because once people believe there is something hidden, neutral language only confirms it. Fans dissected every sentence, every pause between words, every missing detail. And what they found in the silence was more powerful than anything in the statement itself. A contradiction that could not be ignored. And once contradiction appears, narratives fracture. Publicly, both Esther and Dylan remained composed, professionally present, carefully visible. But behind the structure of appearances, something had changed permanently. They no longer moved the same way in shared spaces, no longer spoke with the same ease, no longer occupied the same emotional distance they once did. Not enemies, not allies, something in between, undefined, unresolved, unstable. Then came the final piece, not a confession, not a leak from either side, but a third source. Someone who had no emotional stake in the situation. Someone who only had access. And what they released was not dramatic. It was simple. A time-stamped clip. Short. Incomplete. But enough. Enough to confirm the existence of the confrontation. Enough to validate the tension. Enough to prove that what happened in that dressing room was real. But it did not explain everything. And that was the most dangerous part. Because incomplete truth creates infinite interpretations. And infinite interpretations cannot be controlled. Within hours, the clip spread. Not as evidence of guilt. Not as proof of betrayal. But as proof of conflict. And conflict changes everything. Because it removes comfort. And replaces it with uncertainty. There was no public explosion. No dramatic press conference. No direct confrontation on record. Instead, something quieter happened. Projects were adjusted. Schedules shifted. Appearances became more carefully separated. Not canceled. Not removed. Just distanced. And distance is often the industry's most silent response. Esther and Dylan did not speak publicly about the incident again. Not because the story ended, but because continuing it would give it structure. And structure would give it permanence. So instead, they allowed it to dissolve into ambiguity. But ambiguity is not disappearance. It is transformation. The story stopped being about what happened and became about what people believe happened. And belief is harder to erase than fact. Weeks later, a single image surfaced. Not from the dressing room, not from the leak, but from a separate moment entirely. Both of them in the same event space, standing at opposite sides of the room, not looking at each other, but aware of each other. That image said more than the confrontation ever did, because it showed what words could not. Distance is sometimes the loudest consequence. And what was once a private confrontation had now become a permanent shift in how they existed in the same world. No resolution, no closure, only continuation. And, in the end, nothing was fully confirmed. Nothing was fully denied. But something irreversible had already happened. The moment the hidden camera captured that room, the story stopped belonging to them and started belonging to everyone watching.